Have you been addicted to Instagram and Facebook? There's a lawsuit here for you. It's their fault. You can sue them.
Well, you know what's probably a lawyer out there that'll take that case. I'm sure there's multiple lawyers out there that'll take that case. All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Too Many Topics podcast. Tonight we are in the studio with not only a good friend, but a great guest for the show. A lot of information that this gentleman has. He is a wealth of knowledge in what he does for a living, as well as other entities that he has taken on. So without further ado, Dominick Ciccarelli, entrepreneur, member of Think Design Architecture, and real estate investor, to name the few of what I know anyway. I think he would have gave me a few more, but for the sake of time, we stopped there. But Dominick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, man.
I've been wanting to get on here for a while. I see you guys are doing some great things. I'm a little disappointed Tommy isn't here tonight, but we'll bust his chops next time.
Yeah, unfortunately, Tommy got the COVID bug, so I didn't want him here tonight, even though today was his last day. He felt great, but we both decided it was probably for the sake of your children and my children that we don't get sick and go home to them. But I'm excited for the show. We got some really good stuff to talk about. So with further ado, let's get at it.
Do it.
So, tell me a little bit about yourself now that I'm not a basket case anymore. I'm moving around this 6x5 room.
Yeah, listen, I grew up in Brooklyn, middle class, blue collar family. My dad was in the military. My mom stayed home. Tons of family members, NYPD, FDNY.
Wow.
Grew up like a lot of other people that live here on Staten Island. Hardworking people. Moved out here when I was about 10, and it was a great move for the family,
Brooklyn I didn't hear you. Brooklyn first?
Brooklyn first, and then came out to Staten Island.
That's the normal right trend.
That's right.
Where were you from in Brooklyn?
Garrettson Beach.
Okay.
Yeah. So Garrettson Beach. My dad's Italian. My mom's Irish.
Okay. Same as mine.
Yeah. So Garrettson Beach was a predominantly Irish neighborhood.
Oh wow. Okay.
Growing up, and we made the move to Staten Island, and by far best decision my family made. Opened up my eyes to a whole new world, and tons of kids in the block, and sports, a lot of different things that I was exposed to instead of being in Brooklyn. So
sure. Being exposed in a different way.
Yeah. So it was really great.
Yeah, especially in those days. It was a little different back then.
Yeah.
It was the 80s, I guess. You're a little younger than me. Were you born in the 80s?
1980.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So that was a tough, 80s, 90s. Growing up in Brooklyn was probably the best decision that your family made by bringing you here, which is great. 10, wow. So you pretty much spent the majority of your time here as an adult. And you said your father was in the military. What was he in?
Yeah, National Guard.
Oh, awesome. Love it. Love it.
Staten Island's been good to me. I mean, it's a great place to raise kids. Heavy with sports-oriented, family-oriented, community-oriented. I wouldn't ask for anything else.
Yeah, I agree. We had a gentleman on. I had a gentleman on the last, was it Tuesday, that just started a podcast for sports, and he's trying to zero in on local youth sports opposed to pro sports that everybody's obviously always going after. So it's a nice little niche that I think, especially having kids in this age group that play, I think that it's a tremendous give back to the community that these kids get to see their name in lights, and maybe bring a kid on the show, and maybe had a great game the day before, or you could do so many things from that perspective. And I just think it's a great untapped resource that they could do really well with. So I'm glad you appreciate the sports aspect of Staten Island, because I think that's one of the many values that we have here.
Yeah, my family and I recently moved to Manhattan.
Okay.
And we're only there a few months, but I see a clear difference, both good and bad, but a clear difference with the children and the interaction with the children. In Staten Island, you're still playing in the street. You could still walk to a local schoolyard or a park and put together a pickup game, where in Manhattan, it's a little bit more organized. Maybe you can't walk down the street. Some of the streets are really busy. You're in these big condo complexes or apartment buildings where, the kids maybe meet up in the building as opposed to leaving the building and traveling around. So it's been interesting the last couple of months seeing different how these kids grow up a little bit differently being there.
Sure.
Listen, again, good and bad. I mean, but there's no question my children see the difference, and they're like, wow,
Sure.
it was nice to have these liberties and these freedoms in Staten Island, and maybe a little bit more family oriented and things like that.
Sure, where I would think out there it's probably a little bit different, right? You don't have the neighborhoods the way that you have here.
That's right.
We always talk about Staten Island neighborhoods. I could talk for my own neighborhood. I could walk down my block and there's probably, I don't know, out of 40 houses on the block, 25 of them have been there for 100 years, right? They passed the house down to, and I don't think that, unfortunately, because of the transientness of Manhattan, you miss that, And the other thing I thought was very strange, now that I'm a little bit more involved in sports for the kids, Manhattan, I think, and don't quote me, it could be 0, but I think they have 1 Little League team.
Could be.
And
my kids don't play baseball, but it could be.
And I thought that was, somebody had told me that if you win Staten Island, you typically win the city.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that Queens and Brooklyn and Manhattan and all these places with a ton more people than we have would produce better talent. And it's just a different lifestyle out there. Sports might not be as important as it is to the guy that lives on the South Shore for his kid to make the All-Star team.
There's no question, the kids, and again, there's no right or wrong, it's preference, but my children are now in school with kids that speak 3 or 4 languages and know how to play multiple instruments.
Right.
And there's a little bit of, the focus is someplace else because the sports ability, just the logistics to get teams together and where are these fields are harder to put together. So again, I would love for my children to know multiple language. I'd love for my children to know how to play multiple instruments. Again, it's just different. There's no right or wrong. But
and it's a custom thing, and I think your kids you're putting them in the position to be on that path, which is amazing.
Yeah, they experience the best of both worlds.
Absolutely. But I think that's what it is. The cultures that you're involved with today, sports is 10th on their list, right? Where you have the Staten Island parent that every kid is Derek Jeter. Every kid's going to be a pro basketball player, and it's a little different out there, I would assume. So
it is good, though, on that point. It's not just playing the sport. And listen, we all know our kids aren't going to be in the MLB or in the NHL. But
if we're realistic.
That's right. But playing that sport instills so much more into them. Right? Forget about the physical aspect and the health aspect, but it's the camaraderie, it's the leadership and the team building and playing well with others, which those social skills are lacking a lot in these children these days.
Yes.
A lot of these kids are home on their iPad all day. They don't interact in real life. They're interacting in the metaverse or maybe in virtual reality and more than in reality.
Absolutely.
Which is extremely scary for guys like us and as a concern.
It's troubling to certain people. Sure, absolutely. Yeah. I understand it, and I believe that we had this talk also about it. I have a different view on it a little bit, but I do understand that aspect of it that we're becoming a world of introverts, right? Like, some of the reason that the successes have come to us the way they have is because of our outwardness, because of the fact that you're able to walk into a room full of people and have a conversation with somebody, right? That's my fear. Mm-hmm. My fear is I don't knock the whole metaverse thing because I believe the way that me and you used to play football in front of your house and hung out or whatever, my son's now playing football in Roadblocks with your son, and they're still doing the same thing, and that's where they're hanging out. That's their world. Mm-hmm. So to a degree, like I said the other day, too much of anything is a bad thing, but it does have a huge, huge effect on children's ability to want to go outside their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Because in my pajamas on my couch with my iPad in front of me, I'm very comfortable, right?
Yeah.
But I really appreciate that because I think that it's always important for people to understand the person behind, I had this conversation with my agents all the time. They're like, I'm a real estate agent or a realtor. You're something else also, right? Yeah. You're a father, you're a baseball coach, you're a lover of cooking, I don't know, love dogs. Mm-hmm. Like everybody's something. So I always like, the audience to understand who the person is. So with that being said, what made you get into architecture? Because I know that was your firstborn.
Yeah, absolutely. So it wasn't something I said to myself as a young boy, hey, I want to be an architect, or like some kids say, hey, I want to be the next Jeter, right? I had a talent in art. So I spent a lot of time as a young kid with my grandparents sketching and drawing and a little bit of sculpturing. My grandparents on both sides of my family had a talent of art. I wasn't the most scholastic student in school. I kind of just worked my way through it like most people do. My summer vacations were spent hanging out with an uncle in the Hamptons. my summer vacation was go spend time out there with your family. We didn't have the means to go to Disneyland or fly to Europe and things like that. And my uncle obviously had a very nice life out there. And he went to Pratt to be an architect, grew up in Queens. After graduating and getting married, moved out there because he saw an opportunity of development that was happening out there in the late 70s and 80s. He opened up a home improvement construction company. Using his talents that he learned from the architecture, turned it into actual physical building, which he felt more comfortable doing, building the home as opposed to maybe designing the home.
Awesome.
And I saw this great life he built for his family out there in the construction, let's call it architecture world. So as I became an adolescent and having to start making decisions on what I'm going to do for a living, I'm like, well, I don't want to be a starving artist, although I enjoy doing art. How can I make money in the art world? Right. And the next natural progression was, wait a minute, architecture is an art.
Absolutely.
Super creative, design-based. And I just kind of pointed that way and just ran. And it worked out for me,
Oh, God bless.
So it's a little bit of a backwards, long story.
No, but that's cool. Everybody's got a story, and I love to hear them.
So I was able to turn my talent of art and being creative into a living for my family through architecture.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
And how long have you been doing it now?
So right after college, all during college, I was working for an architectural firm. And then in around 2003, 2004, I decided to go on my own. And so it's almost 20 years.
So, okay. So you got into the business. You obviously had a love for art. Makes a lot of sense, right? The natural progression, I guess, in any business is how to take the next step. So what was that like? What made you decide on, hey, do I go work for some monster firm in Manhattan, like a lot of people choose and do very, very well for themselves? Or do they decide to, hey, you know what, I'm going to trade in my 40-hour-a-week job for a 90-hour-a-week job?
Yeah. So all through college, like I said, I had to work to kind of put myself through school. Towards the end of my college career, I was working for this big architecture firm in Brooklyn. 30-person operation, did a lot of corporate work, did a lot of work throughout New York City. And the years after graduating, I worked my way up and took on more responsibility. And I started really seeing how much money these guys were making. And I'm like, well, why am I sitting here making these guys rich? I can do this. These guys aren't any smarter than me. And I took on a small job on the side. I got the taste of the potential of what I can do.
Soup to nuts from beginning to end, right?
From beginning to end. I was the secretary. I was the bookkeeper. I was the designer. I was the expediter. And I says, you know what? I walked into the office one day. My boss got me frustrated over some nonsense. And I'm like, I don't need this. And I walked
Sometimes
out.
that's all you need, right? Is that one day that somebody pissed in your coffee that morning.
That's right. I walked out. At the time, I wasn't married and didn't have a mortgage. It was a little bit easier to do it, right? If I had those responsibilities, maybe I would have thought twice. I basically went to the phone, and this is another lesson we're going to talk about today. I called every friend, every family member in that phone. I said, listen, I'm on my own. I appreciate the support. I'll never make you look bad. I'll take care of anybody you send my way. And before you know it, I started in my one-bedroom apartment in Bay Ridge. And 6 months later, I was taking office space here on Staten Island,
I love the grassroots approach.
Yeah.
It's overlooked so much today in business. Relationships are everything. I do understand that sometimes working with friends and family isn't the easiest, but at the end of the day, relationships is what keeps business going, right? I always tell agents here, especially in sales, right? If you have a relationship with somebody, there is no such thing as a hard conversation. Right? They understand that you have their best interest at heart, and that's all that matters. But if you have no relationship with somebody, it doesn't matter what you say to them on the phone. You can hand them $1 million, they're still not going to find the value in it.
Yeah. 20 years later, I definitely have a different approach with working with friends and family. And the only advice I would give anybody that will work with friends and family is there can't be a winner and a loser in the relationship. Both people have to be winners.
Bingo. Love that.
What does that mean? It means, listen, if you're going to work with family, you're going to make nothing on that job, but you're going to sleep well at night knowing you did the right thing. And hopefully the reciprocal comes back to you. Well, they appreciate you doing it at cost or without making too much money and giving the quality product.
Right.
And that, if you can make both people winners without being too greedy, that's the only way I'll work with a good friend or a family member, after all these years of getting, learning these mistakes.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So with that being said, give me some of the highlights of this illustrious career that you've put together for yourself.
So I'm incredibly blessed. I was lucky enough to have some really good people around me to help build this business and sustain it these years. I would say about half of my business at this point is on the island. The rest of it's off island. The other 4 boroughs, New Jersey, Long Island. What were the highlights of my career? I would say there are 3 probably pieces that pop into my mind right away. One, I mean, at this point we've designed hundreds of homes on Staten Island. It means a lot to me, even though, it might have been a simple project, or it wasn't this, award-winning project because of maybe budget or things like that. But we were able to build homes for people to raise their families, and throughout every neighborhood, over every budget range. We were able to help these people, create a better place to raise their kids and to live and to occupy. We've also been blessed. We've designed a lot of restaurants. I'm a huge food guy. I know you enjoy going out to eat. I would say over the last 20 years, we've designed maybe 100, 150 restaurants here on the island, businesses that are still open, small businesses, family-owned businesses. And we've got to see them flourish, and we like to see, them in the community, helping the community, people living here, eating there.
That's the give back.
We also had the opportunity to work with some celebrities. We've been featured on some TV shows.
Cool.
We designed
what TV shows? Any that I might know?
Yeah. So Tracy Morgan,
Playboy Channel. No.
Tracy Morgan is a huge fan of sharks. He's done a bunch of custom shark tanks in his homes throughout the years.
Oh, sharks. Okay,
Yeah.
Yes, I saw that. I saw that somewhere on a. I probably watched the show.
Yeah.
Because I remember you guys were involved in that.
So he bought a new home in New Jersey. The home had a guest house, and he wanted to convert the guest home to a shark tank. Literally, the entire home is a shark tank, and the build and the design was featured on the show Tanked.
Awesome.
So that was a cool project to be involved in. It's probably the first and only Shark Tank home we'll ever design.
You never know. Now that you're on this show,
We'll see what
the
happens.
7 people listening might jump right on that offer.
We've also had the pleasure to work with Damon John from
Shark Tank.
Shark Tank,
Not to
creator of FUBU.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. So great guy, down to earth guy. We did his office in the city. We did an apartment from the city, and we did a home from upstate New York.
Fantastic.
Yeah, really great guy. Also a local builder on Staten Island, actually did all the build outs as well. So it was a nice seeing that Staten Island team.
Sure. It's easier to work that way too when you know the players involved.
Yeah. So
I would assume anyway.
Yeah. No, it was great. So those were some cool opportunities.
So you must have to just get back a little bit. I hate doing this, but so you must have a decent team there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you're one man. You probably went from one in the 1-bedroom apartment to Bay Ridge to what now?
So right now on the architecture side, we have about almost 20 employees.
Wow, great.
Yeah. They range from expediters to designers, back-end admin staff, people actually producing the construction drawings, the engineering drawings. We offer a range of different services. We're not just designing a home for you, but we can do some engineering. So it's a one-stop shop operation, which I think also led to our success. Most people, when they hire an architect, they need to hire a bunch of separate trades, maybe a structural engineer or an expediter. We kind of do everything in-house.
Yeah, and I think that being in the real estate industry for as long as I have, and the challenges that I've ran into, that's always been a misnomer of what actually an architect does, right? It's like something happens and call an architect. Well, that's not actually, you might call an architect and he might lead you in the right direction, but that's not actually his job. And we'll talk about some of the challenges that we face here on Staten Island in a minute. But I always like to kind of talk about, you went from a novice, as we just spoke about, to an expert in your field. What advice do you give a young kid today that's either, thinking about going to college, because obviously, college is a prerequisite for this, specialty schools, whatever you want to call it. What is your advice to somebody who is trying to get into the industry today?
I had this conversation with somebody the other day. I think, and I can speak on my own experience, there's no question me making a decision young, as opposed to changing it a few times throughout maybe my college career, making the decision young, even though I wasn't 100% sure, and just sticking with it. Listen, it doesn't matter how much you love something. Throughout your 20, 30 year career, there's going to be peaks and valleys where you're going to lose interest, you're going to be frustrated, or maybe you're going to doubt yourself. I think that any business is difficult, any industry is hard. If you truly enjoy a piece of that business, in my instance, it was the art aspect, right? I didn't go to school for business. I didn't know if I was going to be able to run a business here on Staten Island. So if you could identify young, maybe a talent you have, and shoot in that direction and stick with it, I think you can be tremendously successful. I think the people that change their college major 4 times or go back to school and maybe, pussyfoot with what they're going to do, I think before you know it, you're 30 years old, your back's against the wall, maybe financially, maybe you have a family, and you're still trying to figure out what you want to do. And listen, as you know, in 2 seconds, you're 55 years old, and you don't have the energy.
Be careful, Dom. 50.
You don't have the energy, right, or even the brain power. To start a company or to get into a new industry. Right. So again, it worked for me. Maybe it won't work for everybody, but I truly believe is if at a young age, and listen, young is a relative term. It could be it could be when you're in high school. It could be when you're in college. It could be right after college, right? But just be careful, because if you spend 10 years, going back and forth and second guessing yourself, you may do it your whole life.
Yeah, and I agree to that to a point. I think that we're a lot younger than we think we are. I think people are going to live a lot longer than they ever had. I read an article not too long ago that said newborns today have the ability to live to 120 years old with medicine and everything else that's going on with science. So the age thing I get. I think what I took out of what you just said, which I think is a huge problem with the youth of today, is patience. I think that everybody wants to know, and I get it here in the real estate industry, how much do I make on Friday? This is the wrong place for you. You got to go to like UPS or something. You have to go somewhere where you're going to get a paycheck at the end of the week. And to your point with the college, the flipping of college, to me, that's a patience thing. That's the problem with society today, because we live in a world where I could pick up a supercomputer in my pocket, I press a button, and I have the thing delivered to me in a day. Oh, a day's too long? I want it in an hour. I pay an extra $2. I have it in, it's just that's
instant gratification.
And that's what I feel like we didn't have that as children. Mm-hmm. So you understood what it took to grind to get success, right? I always use this term, success comes before work, only in the dictionary. Mm-hmm. And kids today, I just feel like they don't have that grit. They want to like try something for a couple of weeks and it doesn't work, and everyone was wrong, and that's the shittiest thing in the world. Yeah. And I think that that's, if you want to come full circle with technology, I feel like that's one of the negatives of technology that allows kids today to just constantly be swiping and changing their mind on whatever they're thinking of, right? And let's take it out of the work, realm and just into life. Like if your mind was just changing to a different subject 7,000 times in an hour, you're trained, especially at a 9-year-old age where your brain is evolving, you're training your brain to never focus on anything. Yeah. And that's I feel anyway, my 2 cents there is that I feel that could be detrimental down the road.
My son and daughter do not know the idea of we have to wait for a certain time for that TV show to come on, or wait on the radio for your favorite song to come on. They want to hear this song, they put it on. They want to watch that movie, they put it on.
How funny, you make my hair stand up, like the little bit that I have, because you're so right. Yeah. Like we had to, have your sister holding the antenna for you so the TV was clear. Watching wrestling on Luca Libre on Channel 43 or something. I'm a little older than you.
But these 15-second TikTok clips are destroying these kids' minds. Destroying. I have a rule in my house where every day my kids have to read 20 pages of a book. Anything. It could be a magazine. It doesn't have to be anything super heavy. But believe it or not, staring at that book, holding it, and not being able to move for those 20 pages, listen, it takes time.
So important.
That half hour is building up maybe the stamina to have some attention.
Yes.
And listen, we can talk for hours about these subjects.
What you're reading, right? Yeah, I have one kid that's a whiz, that's top of her class, and I got another kid that he better marry rich because he's going to have a big problem in life.
I have the same problem at home.
And, it's just amazing, right? You have 2 parents that have the 2 kids, same genes. Yeah. One's completely different. Everybody finds their way. I'm sure at 9 years old, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. But we're all victims though because listen, we don't have unlimited energy. So listen, you're out to dinner or you're in the car. It's so easy to throw that iPad in front of them
So we do have to take some of the responsibility, that we're causing this problem by allowing this behavior. So, and listen, I'm not here to preach.
No, but you're 100% true. I had this conversation with somebody the other day that gave me the line about these entitled kids. And you know what? I had to finally turn around, and I normally don't do this, but I had to turn around and say, can I ask you a question? Like, I know you for 20 years. And they said, what? I said, who made them entitled? Do you think they were born that way? Or was it you that maybe had a problem with your parents, so you decided you're going to buy your kid every single thing you can to make up for something maybe that you didn't get when you were a kid, and now you have this kid who thinks what you called entitled? What I think kids today, we don't give kids enough credit. Kids today understand they have options. When we were, and I know we're getting completely off the topic, but it's a little easy to talk to you. Your grandfather, for him to make more money, he had to get another job. Right? He didn't have the ability to come home at 7 o'clock at night and start a side business on his phone on TikTok.
Yeah.
He can today. Mm-hmm. His 75-year-old's on TikTok making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Right? So there is there's a huge value to it there, but I just feel like that I don't know. I just
have to be aware. You have to be conscious of it. And listen, I believe in everything in moderation. Listen.
Yes. Too much water is a bad thing.
Yeah, that's right. The technology is beautiful. I think, listen, if our children can make a living making TikTok videos or podcasts like this, God bless them,
And that's where I lost my train of thought, but that's what I was going after. Yeah. I think kids are recognizing today, because what did our parents tell you? Well, maybe your parents didn't. I mean, my parents didn't, because my father owned a business and it was a different mindset. But it was, I know a lot of friends of mine's parents was like, get that job, that union job, or get that city job, and get that pension, and get that secure, right? Let's work till you're 65 and die at 67, right? And don't enjoy a minute of your life, because maybe you're going to have a grilled cheese on Thursdays, right? So I think kids today are saying, well, instead of me watching my father break his ass so we could have what we needed in life, and him never showing up to a baseball game of mine, never showing up to a practice of mine, you know what? Maybe I'll just make content in my basement, make $80,000 a year, and I'll pay my bills, and I'll get to enjoy my entire life. So they understand that, not everybody needs to make $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. Right. And I think that the parents are the ones that are finding failure in that, and that's why they're kind of putting this negative connotation on it, or whatever you want to call it.
Quick story, and listen, you and I could talk for hours, but
this is good stuff. I think people can relate to.
I was required to take every city exam, fire department, police department, the whole thing. Okay,
there you go.
Sanitation. That was my natural rite of passage, right? I was gonna do that, and that's fine. It's a great job, right? My father just said recently, maybe a year ago, because listen, my father's getting older, and I love him, and although we have vast different opinions maybe on a lot of topics, I like to get his advice or tell him what I'm doing, and get his opinion, even though I know probably most chances I won't take it.
Polar opposite of yours.
Yeah, but listen, he's my father, and I want him to be involved in my life. And he stopped me, and he interrupted me. I was telling him about something I was interested in doing. He goes, "Can I ask you something?" He goes, "For the last 20 years, you've been coming to me for advice on what you should do with this, this, and this. And almost every time you've took the opposite of my advice, and you've done pretty good. Why are you still asking me for advice, And it struck a chord with me, because I really didn't realize it, but I guess it was true. So it goes back to, I open up the firm, 2003, 2004, fire department calls me up. We want you on the job. My whole family's like, you got to take it. You can do both, right? You can work on the job, and then at night in the firehouse, you can be drafting, you can do this stuff. We just took on a bunch of employees. I took on a partner. I knew by me taking that job, although it would have been great, it would have hurt them, because they needed me there, not a probie, on wherever I was going to be training.
Number 7,413.
Yeah. I knew it was going to crush the business, and my heart was in the business. And there were so many reasons, especially when you have your whole family chanting in the background, for me to go that way. And I said no. A year later, they call me back. I say no. Third year, they call me back. They say, if you say no now, we're moving on to the next list. I got to tell you, it took me a lot of time to sit back. I was like, am I making the right decision?
Sure.
And I told them no. The lady on the phone from the FD was like, are you crazy? People kill for this job. And I'm like, I guess with the architecture background, I'm valuable because I have an understanding of buildings, structure,
sure, absolutely,
and things like that. And I was like, you know what? I'm maybe I'll regret it, in 15, 20 years when I could have been out of that job, but
right.
I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, that's the only part. You look back at my age now, and I see kids that are my age that are retired for 12 years. Listen, I lived a great lifestyle. I'm not going to ever change it with anyone, but you do look back later in life and you say, different things of doing what you did. I would never, like I said, change for what I did, but there is some value to it, right? Some of these young kids are getting on a job at 20, they're retired at 40 years old.
100%. Listen, I have a medical insurance bill I'm paying every month out of my pocket.
Right.
I don't have a pension.
Absolutely.
So there's, listen, 20 years go by real quick. But listen, you got to just keep staying forward and stay on course. Just keep pushing.
Listen, that's all we can do, right? That's the entrepreneurial way, which is kind of the new way, right? Everyone talks about this word entrepreneur all of a sudden, like everybody's an entrepreneur. 1990, I never heard that word, right? I just think that people get confused with what it actually means. There's a big difference, I tell people, between busyness and business, right? Just because you run around all day long and you're busy and you tell me how busy you are you actually
being productive?
Right. Are you accomplishing anything, right? So I think that's a little bit of a scary word, I think, that young kids today can get a hold of and kind of hide behind. And that's my only fear, is that the word entrepreneur is too, broad. Yeah. And it doesn't zero in on people's talents the way it should. At least its name doesn't. So I think that kids sometimes feel like, to be an entrepreneur, I have to chase 8 rabbits. And the story of that, right? But the story is the 2 rabbits. You chase 2 rabbits, you don't catch either one. And that's always what I fear with kids today, that kind of, I want to sell baseball. It's the Gary Vee way, who I love. Don't get me wrong. I think the guy's a genius. I think he's a prophet of our time. But I don't think his methods work for everybody.
No, there's no question.
And that's the part that...
Going back to what you were saying about, you can make a living, in your basement, making $8,000 a year doing, let's just say, TikToks, right? I think we have to be aware that times are changing. And a lot of parents put these pressures on their kids. You're going to be a doctor. You're going to be an architect. You're going to be a lawyer. You're going to be the president of the United States. Listen, I'll be honest with you. As long as my children are happy and could find true happiness, I don't care what they're doing. As long as they're responsible people for the lifestyle they choose. If they want to travel to Europe 3 times a year, then go in a direction for a career that can support that lifestyle. If you're okay living in my basement for your whole life, which I would never allow, then go on that path which affords you that type of lifestyle, right? Happiness is a huge void that's missing in this world, especially with the social media, right? Everyone is posting and they're it's the people are posting the highlights of their life, right, but young, fragile minds,
of their life.
Right? But these young, fragile minds think this is normal, right? And we're, some adults can't separate.
What's wrong
truth.
with me? How come? Why is my husband such a bum? Right? Why is my wife not doing this? Why is my kid not doing that? Yeah. And again, that's another whole podcast we can do on, reality versus social media. I know that there's new things coming out with technology. That Be Real is one of them. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. So basically, they have these new platforms that give you 2 minutes to take a picture. So it's like you got to kind of get yourself in a situation where you can't go put that beautiful outfit on and do your hair. Right. So it's kind of getting, and I like it for a younger perspective, for younger kids, 1,000% of just because of what you just said, right? These kids struggle with, hey, how come I don't look like that? How come I don't do that? How come I don't got this many likes? How don't I don't have this? I don't have that. And the peer pressure and the competition is tough. So that's what I like about these things. And you see TikTok's doing it now, and everyone will start doing it where it's more of a live thing that you have to show me what you look like right now. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't hear about that. Yeah. Another thing I've been trying to be conscious about is, listen, your kids follow suit what you're doing. So if you're on your phone all day posting, guess what? They're going to be on their phone posting. But if you're home reading, they're going to be home reading. Right. So one of the things we changed when we made this move to the city was we gave up our social media. We didn't delete our accounts, but we just said, listen, unless it's business related, we're not posting anymore. We're just taking a break from it. And listen, I'm not saying that, I'm never going to post a picture ever again, but we just said, for now, let's just make a conscious effort. And I noticed my children aren't even on anymore because
maybe instead of me being on social media, I'm home reading a book, and now my daughter's next to me reading a book.
Well, kids do what they see. I get that. Unfortunately, I do this for right now, and I'm not going to say I do it for a living, but I'm very heavily involved in this. Social media, podcasts.
But it's part of your business.
Right. So they know, like, Daddy's working in his office when I'm up there. I'm not on the couch, like, posting TikToks.
Right.
Like, hey, babe, hold the camera for me.
Right.
I'm trying to do post-production stuff, which unfortunately has you on the computer a lot. But again, back to my original thing. If my children want to create a TikTok account and see if they can create content, I'm their biggest fan. I'm the one that's going to support them the most, as long as what you said earlier, the prerequisites are done, right? Making sure that the grades are there, making sure you're listening to your mother, making sure your room is clean, making sure that, you have to do the basic necessities. Then you can get, the benefits of life. But I'm a little different with social media with my kids. I time them. I don't let them run rampant on it, but I'm not one of these parents that try to spew negativity towards it, because I would be foolish, because it's not going anywhere. That's like your great-grandmother telling your grandmother that the television is going to be the demise of society, and radio is where it's at, right? All this is an evolution of the next step of communication, and that's and the person that says, "Oh, it's not," you're the same guy that thought that that the internet was going to be a failure in 1982, right? This is just a joke. Facebook is a fad, and the only reason why Facebook works is because Zuckerberg was smart enough to understand that the only thing that people need in life besides food and water is human communication. And that's what that is built for, human communication.
TikTok is way more educational than a lot of people think.
Absolutely. Listen, it's the next thing.
I've learned so much.
People are sleeping on TikTok.
Yeah, there's no question.
They're sleeping on TikTok.
Yeah, even my children, like something as silly as the elf on the shelf, different setups, every night.
100%,
like, my son helps us with my younger daughter. He's setting up at night, the elf on the shelf.
Sure.
And, we're getting creative, and you start Googling stuff. YouTube, we were talking about that earlier. There's no question there's a level of education that comes with it. But then you're also hearing now these commercials. Have you been addicted to Instagram and Facebook? There's a lawsuit here for you.
Oh, I have not seen that. Yeah. But that's the next thing.
Yeah, Facebook and Instagram made you addicted to this. It's their fault. You can sue them.
Well, you know what? There's probably a lawyer out there that'll take that case. I'm sure there's multiple lawyers out there that'll take that case. But what I always told my kids, I said, you can go on the computer as much as you want. You can go on the iPad, the phones, text away, tweet away, do it all. But you have to be either an eye doctor or a hand doctor when you get older, because that's what we're going to be in need of in 20 years from now. Everyone will be blind, and everyone will have carpal tunnel syndrome. Right.
Going back to the TV, right? Yeah. Don't sit too close to the TV. Now we're staring at 4-inch screens.
How about Oculus? Now you put the fucking thing on my nose.
Yeah.
Like, my mother always told me, don't sit next to the TV. Nuts. Now you put this thing, it's right on my nose.
Yeah.
I don't see how healthy that could be. Yeah. I'll be honest. I have it. My kids have it. We don't play with it much because, quite honestly, it makes me dizzy.
Yeah.
And besides the fact we played one of these games, I almost killed my wife, pushed her off a plank or something. She almost died. So we don't play that game anymore. I almost killed my brother-in-law on a holiday weekend.
That's great.
Yeah, no. Darren was not happy with me that weekend.
Yeah, we don't have one. I've used them. Yeah. And listen, again, it's science, technology, right? Unbelievable.
But guys like us that put it on, we can't have it on for long.
Yeah.
These kids have these things on for hours and hours and hours. And, that's the stuff that, I get a little, nervous about. But we're getting too far off the topic, because I really want to share some information that I feel like a lot of our audience can use because of the pitfalls that come up in owning a home, in buying a home, and selling a home. Was the documentation right when I originally bought it? Did the title company maybe overlook something? And now I'm sitting here and I have X, right? So I call up somebody like you, and, I can talk from my real estate perspective. Is, it's typically the pools, the fences, the decks, the cabanas, the things that, me and my buddy who's a fireman just decided I'm going to throw a deck up in my backyard over the weekend, and I'm going to put it, 6 inches on my neighbor's property.
That's right.
Or the guy that wants to put the fence up 13, 14 feet just so his neighbors can't see him.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the typical Staten Island stuff. So what do you see out there, and what do you, what is your best advice when stuff like this comes up, and you would know the violation names better than I would? in terms of ECB or building department and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Where their first step could be in rectifying this stuff.
So it's a great question. Again, it's a topic we can do a whole segment on. Through my career, I've seen everything. So 2 types of calls we get is, I'm about to sell my house. We found out that there's some illegal stuff, which could be a plethora of things. We need you to save the day, fix it so I don't lose my deal. And unfortunately, working with the city, nothing happens quick. So chances are, if you have that problem and you're finding out like a week before the closing, you're going to lose this deal, right? So how can you be proactive? Typically, young, new families or new homeowners, they just, a couple just gets married. They're super excited. They want to buy a home, fix the home up. And going back to taking advice from their family, right? Oh, just do this, just do this, just do this. You don't need a permit. You don't need a permit.
Sure, the father tire kicker.
That's right. And the truth of the matter is, they're like, don't call an architect because they're super expensive. Money. Yeah, you're gonna get $1,000 bill for that phone call, which couldn't be further from the truth, right? All day long, people in our office are doing, consulting and giving advice because we don't want to see people make the mistake. And listen, if they choose to hire us to do it, then great. If they don't, then listen, at least we gave them some good advice. So what are the biggest pitfalls? I mean, listen, and there are trends in the market. So on your end, people maybe before them built the home or did a renovation to the home and never got the certificate of occupancy, right? Which means they really didn't do the final paperwork. And listen, it happens very often. Why? You finish building a home, you're broke. You're so excited to get into that home and now you have to pay to furnish it. You forget about doing that last part of paperwork, right? And before you know it, 5-10 years pass, you're growing out of that house, need a new one, and now you need your C of O, right? So I would say by far, nobody closes their permits. And you really can't blame anyone but yourself, right? Because the architect doesn't know when you finish. We're not keeping, we've been done for a year. It took you a year to build this home. We've been absent. Right. So I would say that's probably the number one. Listen, if you're going to do a project the right way, just don't forget at the end, call back your architect.
Which is bizarre to me, thinking that you spent all this time, all this money, all this screaming and yelling at each other, because anyone that built a house knows that you and your wife will fight or you and your husband will argue. And the truth of the matter is, from my perspective now, I have a hard time selling your home, right, without a C of O.
Right.
So all you're doing is creating a monster headache for yourself because you invested all this money into this beautiful home that you can't sell.
That's right. So for real estate agents, the moment they get that listing, even when they're researching to try to pitch and get that listing, they can look like a superstar by just going on one website, which is free to get onto, type in the address, and it can come up, and everything will come up that if there's something opened or there's a violation or a complaint, and then address it at that moment instead of a week before the closing.
Absolutely.
Going back to trends in the market.
And I think, just to jump in real fast, I think realtors have to do a little bit better of a job as well. I know they're not architects, but it is a free website. It is due diligence. It doesn't take more than 15, 20, 30 seconds to jump on there and show your value to your homeowner. Now, I always advise my agents, that's where it ends, right? You're not an architect, so you don't give architectural advice,
right?
But you can at least say, hey, take this paper and bring it to a licensed architect and find out what the problems are.
That's right. And not wait for the title report to be finished, which is when you find out, which is at the last hour.
Right.
Going back to trends, so especially here in Staten Island, backyards have, the last 10, 15 years, have just blown up. People are spending exorbitant amount of money renovating their backyards. I know people that spend $500,000, $600,000 renovating their backyard.
Yeah, sure. I've been in a few of them.
Yeah. So listen,
mostly of them are your friends, but
open fire pits, not permitted anywhere in the city of New York without a fire department approval. Not permitted. The only people that can put an open fire in Staten Island, Pouch Camp, the Boy Scouts.
When you say open fire,
so if you have a fire pit in your backyard, technically it's not allowed.
Like gas or wood?
You cannot have an open fire in New York City unless you have a permit from the fire department. Period.
Great advice for for both of you guys listening right now. That is great. I did not know that, and I'm not sure that 75% of the backyards on the South Shore have fire pits.
They have fire pits coming out of their pool.
They have fire pits coming out of the fire pits.
That's right. So listen, let's talk about these backyards, which, listen, they're beautiful. The pool, the deck, the cabana, the outdoor kitchen, the pavers, the fire, all of this stuff needs permits. It sounds crazy. It needs permits. I did a couple of YouTube videos during COVID, and I was trying to give some of this advice. there's like this myth that if your pool is less than 400 square feet, you need a permit. Everyone knows it. Everyone says it. People install pools like crazy. That's right.
They made the 14 by 28 because of that.
That's right. Now, but what about the plumbing lines? What about the gas lines? What about those electric lines? Those all need permits, right? Then they paved their whole backyard. Well, where's that rainwater going? You're dumping it onto your neighbor, or you're dumping it onto the street, which, again, is not permitted, right? So listen, be careful with the backyards. You're investing a ton of money, and one complaint from a neighbor, or when you go to sell it, it could come up. And I've been in instances where people are ripping out pools, ripping out backyards because an architect or engineer cannot legalize it because
it was done improperly.
Too close to the property line, too big. I can name a ton of issues. So I would say people not getting C of Os, people going crazy in their backyard. And then you have the old school violations, right? The illegal apartment in the basement, the illegal deck, the fence in the neighbor's property, the fence is too tall. Just be careful. Most architects or engineers, I think if you call them and ask them a quick question, would be more than happy to answer it. They're not going to take 5 calls. They're not going to spend an hour on the phone with you. Sure. But if you say, I'm going to replace my fence, can I put it back in the same spot it is? And I'd probably tell you no. Why? Because maybe that fence originally was built in the wrong spot, right? Maybe that fence is 6 inches on your neighbor's property. Now you're going on your neighbor's property to rip out a fence and put it back. And technically it's their fence.
Their fence now.
Yeah. Right. So, it's New York City's tough. New York City's tough, man. I mean, the rules here are by far more stringent than almost any place else in the world. Yeah.
And I could just say from a real estate perspective that, and it's unfortunate, but it's the truth, right? I'm going to be honest with everybody right now. When a buyer sees that there's a problem with the house, they take advantage. And you could say that they don't, and you could say that there's good people out there, and I get it. But when a person sees that you have to have a violation removed or somehow corrected, they're going to want 3 times the amount of what it really costs to do it because they feel that they now are in a position that they didn't really want to be in. So just to give you another layer of security, yes, you do it for the right reasons because of what Dominick said, and you do it to protect your money because you're going to lose money at the end of the day. You'll leave it on the table for the stupidest reasons at times. Yeah,
and the buyer could think that you knew about it the whole time and you were trying to pull the wool over their eyes.
And typically that's what it is, right? I mean, why wouldn't they think that?
Yeah.
You bought this house and, how many times have you heard this? I bought it that way.
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't mean that, there's a lot of guys out there years ago and you know better than anybody. And I'm not going to start slandering the building department, but, in the 70s and 80s, it was like the wild, wild west over there.
Especially out here.
Right. So was it more rampant out here? Yeah. So those are sometimes come to roost later in life, right? I'm sure you've had things on your desk and you saw names and you were like, oh, no.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, you got good and bad and everything.
I've had people buy homes with, they find out 20 years later the extension on the home's illegal. And I bought it this way. I'm like, I know, but just because you bought it that way and it appeared in your survey doesn't mean it was legal, know? What I also noticed with banks, based on the economy and the market, they're more stringent or less stringent, right? When we're in a crazy market where things are going well, a lot of things, get passed or swept under the rug and banks finance them.
Well, that's from a title perspective, but it's not from a lending practice. It's more of what they require in the title. If they're not going to require a C of O, if they're not going to require certain documents that are going to expose a problem, then the loan officer and no one's going to give them that paperwork. That's right. And that's how the deals are going to go through.
And then I noticed in times like this where the real estate market's coming down, especially we were talking about this earlier in 2008, they were criticizing every little thing.
Absolutely.
And so
there's always got to be a fall guy, right? They always got to figure out a reason of why. So obviously it was an easy transition to real estate with you, with the knowledge that you carry from the architectural perspective. So tell me a little bit about that. I know over the last few years you've been building up a nice portfolio of properties, and I know now you've actually got out of New York and now you're starting to go down south and buy some stuff. So talk to us a little about that. How's that working?
So it's been interesting the last couple of years. Me being in the forefront with laws changing, I kind of see things coming down the pipe. And over the last few years, I've been seeing a lot of the bureaucracy getting worse and worse, specifically here in New York City. Like most people that's in my field, I work with builders and investors all the time as clients. And they opened my eyes to the real estate game. I would say about 15, 20 years ago, I probably bought my first 2-family home and, got the taste of it and managed it and saw the rewards of owning real estate. Yes, built up a portfolio, from 1 and 2 family homes to apartment buildings and things like that. But now with the way things are happening in New York City, I mean, listen, there's annual lead reports and annual bed bug inspections. And if you're not familiar, annual DHCR reports for rent-stabilized buildings. Annual boiler inspections, annual gas inspections. It's almost impossible to make money because you have all of these agencies with their hand out for inspections. And it's making it harder and harder to evict bad tenants due to the politics of the city.
Absolutely.
Forget about COVID, which added another whole layer of giving rights to tenants, which I'm all for.
Right, ability to stay in someone else's home for free.
Right, but so going back to, listen, both people need to be winners in relationships to work well and and to flourish. You can't give all the rights to the landlord and can't give all the rights to the tenants. It's got to be a well, harmonious relationship.
It's the only way it works. And
New York City, in my opinion, is just everything is pro-tenant, especially with the bigger stuff, right? The multiple dwellings, I'll call it. So I made a conscious decision about 1.5, 2 years ago to sell the multifamily stuff that I have. Keep the 1 and 2 families, the smaller stuff, and go to states that are maybe more landlord friendly, where you can have conversations with tenants and you can actually get evictions done when there are problems. So I've invested in some stuff in Alabama, North Carolina.
Awesome.
North Georgia's on the table. I know you've had some other guests here that also investing down south.
Yeah, sure.
So, again, it's a way to diversify a little bit. For 20 years, all my real estate was on Staten Island. I mean, you having all your eggs in one basket is also a problem,
With real estate, sometimes it's good, right? Out of sight, out of mind. It's not always great. Now I got to give a piece of the pie to a management company. So it has its checks and balances. But I think what you did was, there's something called the law of the lid. I don't know if you're a John Maxwell fan, but he's got a book out, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And one of them is called the law of the lid. Like you're going to hit a lid at some point where you won't be able to get any higher. So I think that's what you also recognized, coupled with the fact that, the people running this state are buffoons and they're anti-real estate and anti-homeownership, property rights, whatever you want to call it. When they come up with laws that they're trying to pass of a good guy eviction, which basically gives them a lease in perpetuity, right? There's no way you can evict them. How is that helpful, right? Yeah. How is that? There's so many circumstances where that doesn't work. And that's just one of the things that you could pick off the tree. And I think that on a whole, and that's what we're going to end up with is kind of what you're feeling going forward of this market and where we see. I have my own opinions, but I always like to hear others on where you think we're going in 23, 24, 25, from this real estate market.
So I think that we haven't seen the bottom. I think that things are going to get worse. I think we have at least another 6 months of maybe rate increases and values coming down. What's unique about what's happening now, in my opinion, is not only is it the economy with the interest rates and going up and things like that, COVID forced material to raise. So we never really had that, but material would always go up, but we had exorbitant increases in material to build
3
homes.
times.
So how do you naturally when interest rates go up, value comes down. But when it costs the builder unexpectedly so much more money to build that home, how much lower could they go? So what's going to happen?
You make a great point.
Right. So, when you have the new couple that just got married that were able to afford that, I'm just going to use Staten Island. Let's just say $600,000, $700,000 home. Well, even if you want to pay $500,000, $600,000 home, which you can't even get a semi these days or a townhouse for that much, right?
$650 is our average price.
Right. Okay. So $650. Now with the increase in rates, they can't afford that house anymore, that monthly payment. So now they're forced to wait because there's nothing cheaper. Now, what about that builder that just built that townhouse, that the person that was looking to buy the $1 million detached home now has to make a decision. Am I going to buy the townhouse because I want a house or just wait and rent? So I think what's going to happen is more people are just going to continue to stay where they are, whatever that might be, whether it's living home with mom, renting, maybe not selling the house for a bigger house. They're just going to wait until the rates come down. And I think the builders are going to get hurt. They're going to have to lose money on a lot of these deals.
I think new constructions will get hurt, absolutely, based on what you just said. But what I also think that people don't take into consideration is real estate's always expensive. You know, I talk with my father's friend who owns, you know, hundreds and hundreds of pieces of real estate. And he said to me, "You buying real estate, kid?" And I was like, it's just expensive right now. He looked at me and goes, "It's always expensive." And he's right. So to that point, I think that people understand that real estate is just expensive, and they're going to put them. They have options, right? I could rent or I could buy, I can own, and we know the differences. We know the comparisons on net worth, what it does to people from owning to renting. You know, the difference is they say your net worth is $5,500 if you rent, opposed to $246,000 if you own, right? So there's that value there of home ownership. There's the quality of life. All that stuff is great. Where I think the bigger fear that people should understand is interest rates are interest rates, houses are houses. You're going to pay $100 more, $200 more, $300 more, maybe eat pasta for a year, you figure it out. The problem is the pasta is 3 times the amount of money now. And that's like I had a podcast a few months back and we talked about 73% of people that bought during COVID are unhappy. And I don't necessarily think they're unhappy because the price of their house might be lower, because I don't think we do that, right? I mean, do you go on Zillow every day and look at the price of your house, right? It's not Bitcoin. You're not staring at the thing every 10 minutes. Yeah. It's a long-term investment. I think they're unhappy because they didn't anticipate the cost of living to triple inside of 8 months. Yeah. Right? Even these interest rates, I've been in this game a very long time, and I was in the 12s, 11s, 10s, 8s, 7s. The difference today is never did they triple inside of 8 months. You know, people were looking in the 2s in January, and now you're in the 7. I mean, it's just that's the difference. The difference is, you know, so rapidly. To your point, construction being up is a point that, you know what, I really thank you for that, because I didn't even take it into consideration. You know, does it affect my market? Not as much, because I don't think new construction is our house out here, but it's got to affect the parcels out west and down south where they're building 200-300 houses, new construction tracks. Those people have to really be hurting.
And I think in this conversation we're talking about, you know, not an avid real estate investor. We're talking about a homeowner, a typical homeowner buying their primary residence. Absolutely. Right? Listen, there are people that are in the game that are going to do well in this market. You know, the cash buyers or the people in more getting commercial notes, right? Because those interest rates are still reasonable.
Absolutely.
But the homeowner buying the primary home is really, I think, what we're focused on now, and the people that, you know, are affected the most.
Sure.
There's no question. Yeah.
No, and I think that's who we cater to here on Staten Island, right? We don't have this large influx of commercial high rises. You know, we're 1 and 2 family houses, right? That's our $650,000 apple that we sell. But listen, I mean, I don't want to keep you much longer. We had a great conversation. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, love being here, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope to have you back on again soon. And let everybody know where they can follow you.
So Think Design Architecture is the architects, Think Design Architecture's page on Facebook and Instagram. My social media is D.Ciccarelli Jr. I'm on Instagram, Facebook as well.
Spell Ciccarelli.
Ciccarelli. Listen, our office is here. Staten Island's our home. Anyone has a question, as big or small, we're happy to answer them for you. Our staff, you know, we're in 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. Google us. You'll learn a lot about us, and we're here to help you out.
I appreciate that. I know Dominick a long time. He's a man of his word. He does what he says he's going to do. He's helped out a tremendous amount of clients of mine that I've sent to him. So definitely check out his website or his socials and see the stuff that he's doing. You'll be pleasantly surprised.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. All right. Check us out wherever you listen to your podcasts or social media stuff. I go through this every week, but I think everybody knows by now where to find us. Appreciate you listening, and we'll be back next week. Thank you.